So in this video, I'm going to give you a very simple example of an information advantage, and I'll explain things like why LLMs don't typically work the way that people are using them today. So I'm going to show you how when domain expertise is structured, when you structure the knowledge in such a way that you teach the LLM not just the artifact, you don't just tell it about the artifact that you want it to create or the work product that you want it to create. You also explain how that work product is created or how you create that work product. When you combine those two together, you get a significantly better output. And in this case, I'm going to show you how to simulate an individual's writing style, me. I'll be putting a little bit of my own domain expertise on blast and showing you how to write things that are convincingly similar to what I write. Before I get too deep into this, I want to say thank you to some of the open source projects that have contributed to this. The first one is the Esther Ontology. Ramona Kuhn and the team behind the Esther Ontology. It's on GitHub. I'll send a link in the comment. Please give them a star. It's rare to get an ontology that's this complete and works as well out of the box as this one. They seriously put some significant effort into it, and I just want to show some appreciation there. I'm also using Olama, LM Studio, using a couple of open source models, using Minimax M2, I'm using Alma, the 32 billion parameter version, and I'm using GPT OSS 120B. All of these open source projects are out there and available. There's open source LLMs, there's open source LLM API wrappers, all of this stuff's out there, and we don't spend enough time saying thank you. So thanks. Without you, a lot of this work wouldn't be possible. The reference environment that I'm using is actually just right over my shoulder there. It's a Dell Pro Max T2 Tower. The important specs are 128 gigs of RAM. It's got an NVIDIA RTX 6 Pro 6000 GPU. Yay! Also running on an i9. It's a 285K. Each one of these, the NVMe SSD hard drive, that's also extremely important. All of these help run large and small models locally. You may not need something as big or as beefy as what I'm running, but it's a really good reference environment for running local AI. So we all know that AI needs rules. It needs some rules to follow or it will hallucinate. And what I'm about to show you is how, if you structure the rules appropriately, you can get much higher quality outputs from an LLM. And you can do this and iterate on this in a few hours. So instead of building something that's big and complex, you can very quickly build and iterate. And like I said, in this example, I'm going to teach you how to build a system, build a prompt that writes content sounds exactly like my LinkedIn posts. And I'm going through three different levels here. The first level, I'm basically saying we have no rules. Based on what you know about me from your internal knowledge graph, can you create some rules that an LLM could follow and then create content that sounds like me? And spoiler alert, the answer is no, as you can imagine. Then I go to two different types of system prompts. If I give an LLM examples of my writing, can it create the rules that will enable any LLM really to emulate my writing style? And then the second level, I use the Esther Ontology to essentially give it the domain expertise about writing. Here are all of the rules from this domain, and with examples of my writing, can you extract the rules from my writing that I use most frequently and create a style guide that any LLM can follow to create content that sounds like me? So, what I'll show you is how to go from really bad to really, this sounds a whole lot like Vin. So, let's get into the demo. So, this is our first level of context. Essentially, I've given it no context at all. And I'm relying on the LLM, in this case it's GPT OSS 120B, I'm relying on its internal knowledge of my writing style. And as you can see, even though this isn't connected to the internet, it's obviously been trained on some of my writing, and it knows something about me because it's able to explain, might be a tech blogger or a writer known for long form data driven analysis, perhaps known for a thoughtful tone. Well, that's kind of you to say. Might be known for posts on tech, especially about company. So it understands something about me. It has obviously seen my writing before. And here's what it produces when we say, here's the topic, and here's really just a person. We hope you know this person well enough to create some content based on what you know about them. And what it produces isn't very good. It's not very aligned with my writing style and the types of things that I say. So this is just that layer one use case where we're saying, hey, we don't have any rules. Can you, if I give you the person, do you know enough about this person's writing style to create the rules for yourself and then follow them in writing? Which, well, as we can see, it doesn't. So this is the second example, second layer of context where I gave it a simple LLM style guide. So the way I created this style guide is by giving an LLM several months worth of my LinkedIn posts and saying, build structured rules based on the examples that I've provided you that an LLM could use to emulate and understand the writing style. I didn't tell it what the rules of writing were. I just said, hey, use your internal knowledge graph, your internal understanding of the rules of writing and all of the tools that you could potentially use to write, and come up with some rules and come up with this document, the style guide, to explain how an LLM would simulate my style. And it comes up with things like voice persona, tone, diction, sentence style, structure, and logic. This is much better formatted than just letting the LLM sort of guess and struggle its way through this. It even has at the very end constraints and anti-style, things not to do, which is an important part of any style guide or any instruction set. Not just explaining what to do, but also explaining what not to do. So this resulted in a significantly better output. So as you can see in this response, it looked at the LLM style guide, extracted significant information from it, and then as a result of that information, it created a much shorter this time. It looks a whole lot more like a LinkedIn post, given a little lengthy, but that's okay. And it's a whole lot more structurally similar to my writing, but it's not quite perfect. This is, yeah, I mean, for the conceptual pieces aside, we're not going to deal with that too deeply in this example, but content issues aside, this is actually pretty good. It is much better aligned with the way that I write, but it's still not perfect. It's better. It is a significant improvement. And so you can see that just by structuring information about not only the artifact that I want produced, but how I want the LLM to produce that artifact, I've already created a significant improvement in that work product. Now, this is the third level of instructions where I've used the Esther ontology to format this instruction set. So in this case, you can see that it's pulling the rules. And I did the exact same thing as the last style guide that I created, except this time, instead of just giving it examples, I give it examples and the Esther ontology, which explains all of these rhetorical tools and devices and styles of writing from across the literary world. And I said, here are the rules of writing. Here are my examples of my writing through LinkedIn. I want you to look for the most common rules that my writing follows and create a systems instruction that an LLM could follow based on the Esther ontology, which defines all of the domain level rules. And I want you to find what rules I follow. You can see this is significantly shorter. It's more concise. It's better structured. It is more specific with the types of tools that I'm using, and it's using these terms that are well defined, well understood. Beyond just the ontology, the LLM knows what these things are, and it's also getting a definition inside of these instructions. It's getting examples from my writing. So this is far more specific. And as a result, the output is also much better. So this time, the output's actually really good. You know, why does the everything store feel like a laggard in AI? Because it's busy polishing hype while the balance sheet bleeds. I mean, that sounds a whole lot more like one of my starting lines. Amazon is a logistics juggernaut, but its AI engine is a data dumpster. I mean, again, content-wise, we do have some issues. There are definitely factual errors that we'll find inside of this post. And I asked it, hey, do it again, this time with more substance to the argument to see, would it, even if my prompt emphasized the substance of the argument, would it still follow my writing style? And yes, of course, it did. It's still listening to the instructions that are passed in, but you'll notice there are some flaws. There are still some problems in this. It's using terms a little bit too heavily, relying on terms from the document that I gave it. So that means I need to improve one of two things. I either need to say in those anti-patterns or don't do this section of the instructions, don't use the language from this document, come up with language and terms of your own. Don't use the English sort of literary terms in anything that you generate either. So you can see this is an iterative process. You use the instruction guide, you refine the instruction guide based on the output, based on the activities that you're doing, and there's this back and forth. But the advantage of doing it this way is how fast you arrive at a finished product. In just a few iterations, you can see how we've gone from something that just doesn't work to something that is very structured. And now if I want to sort of turn the knobs and tweak the language, I can use the ontology and say, hey, use this literary device. Hey, do this a little bit more. Don't do this. Never use this tool. So I can get very, very specific and very granular in my instructions, in my style guide. And this doesn't just work for your writing. This works for code. This works for customer support, technical documentation. This works across domains. As long as you can define exactly what the tools and what the mechanisms you want the LLM to use in creating the work product, you can exert significant control over the work product. And this works on a multiple different models. Do the exact same thing. I used Minimax and went through 1, 2, and the third scenario, and the third scenario is just as good. But again, you see that this one's a little bit more heavily relying on some of those terms. It's sort of labeling each one of these. And so obviously this is something that I want to address. I want to remove some of this dashed formatting. I don't know what these line breaks are here for. I used Alma, which is a much smaller model, and here's the dirty little secret of AI. These massive 120 billion, 230 billion parameter models. Well, guess what? This is only 32 billion, and stylistically, it's just as good. So the more concrete the instructions that you give to the model, the better these smaller models perform, and you get very little difference in performance between a smaller model and a much, much larger model. So the more specific your instructions, the better these models perform. So you can see that with instructions about not just the artifact that I want to create, but how I personally create, in this case, LinkedIn posts, the LLM is significantly more capable than without that level of granularity. And the more you iterate, the more problems that you find and solve through this instruction set, the more complete the instruction set gets. And as I reference in the article, the companion to this, there are a number of different systems. Amazon is the example that I use, but there's a number of different systems that if you give the rules document that I've just shown you how to create, it can extract the knowledge graph from those rules, from that document, and use those. Amazon uses automated reasoning, and it uses those to constrain the activity of agents across a range of tasks. And like I say in the article, I use this simple framework. Obviously, I don't use LM Studio. We build this in code. It's an app, but we use this exact same process to iteratively develop and improve the rules that our agents use to create everything from your structured LinkedIn post to your structured technology, knowledge base article to sales presentations, to everything. All of the fundamental rules that we use to write, and not just as a department level, not just like a New York Times style guide level, but down to a much more granular level of detail that could be personalized to an individual's writing style. Now the work products are significantly more aligned with what I want them to be, and I don't have to spend as much time editing. And this one artifact can be monetized multiple times. It works for coding just as well as it works for text. It works for really any type of content creation style as long as you have the rules. That ontology for English language would have to be an ontology for coding if you wanted it to work for that domain, but it works just as well. So it's really important to look at this and say, this is a paradigm for iterating when you don't have a knowledge graph to begin with, when you don't have, anything to begin with, you don't have instructions, you have nothing. This is how you iterate from a very low level of information maturity to that first version, the one that is good enough to be put out and productized, where we are putting this in front of people. And I talk about my AI go to market framework, where you move from your internal review process to your alpha, your beta release, and then eventually your SOM, releasing it to that first layer of customers. And now you're getting human feedback. And so you have to design your system in such a way that the type of feedback that you're hearing me talk through in the videos is the type of feedback that your system is now gathering from users. And so this is really important because it's a process that you can follow to create this sort of minimum viable information or instruction set to get the LLM and your version one of an agent to function more reliably. You can see it's very quick. And if you're smart about your opportunity discovery and your initiative prioritization, you can build these in a way that's reusable across multiple domains because there's a lot of these high level tasks that if you build the framework around, it's very reusable in the same way that this example here is too.